Hi, this is Dan from Tornado Talk. Please take a moment to go to our website, tornadotalk.com, and click Support the Show on the menu. As you know, we offer this podcast free, but it is not free to produce. We accrue monthly costs, including writing, researching, recording, editing, and producing. Now, if you click the Donate button on that page, you can help us underwrite the cause. That's tornadotalk.com. Click Support the Show on the menu, and then you'll see the Donate button. And thank you in advance.
This is Tornado Talk, a podcast about one of nature's most fascinating phenomenon. Share your tornado story with us by email, Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com. That's Jen and Dan at tornadotalk.com. Now, meteorologists Jennifer Naramore and Dan Holliday. Tornado Talk is on.
Christmas Day 2015.
Folks, Merry Christmas.
There's the joy and laughter of children opening gifts, cherished times with family and friends, and the celebration of the true meaning of Christmas.
I'm dreaming of a white Christmas.
In north central Texas, there wouldn't be a white Christmas this year. The weather was beautiful, warmer than average. It would be hard to fathom what would happen just one day later.
A late December tornado outbreak just one day after Christmas.
The tornado is on the ground, and it is big, a very large tornado.
This is Tornado Talk, Texas tornadoes. On Saturday, December 26, 2015, a powerful tornado tears through parts of Sunnyvale, Garland, and Rowlett, causing EF4 damage. There would be a total of 12 tornadoes that day, killing 13 and injuring nearly 70 others.
Getting the word out about potential severe weather is the job of the National Weather Service. Mark Fox is the warning coordination meteorologist at the Fort Worth Forecast Office. He knew it would be a challenge to grab the public's attention on Christmas Day.
We knew a couple of days before that there was going to be a pretty intense system coming through. Now, whether or not that was going to mean tornadoes, whether it was going to be the cold front that came through, or a little bit of frozen precipitation, we had a pretty good idea about a week or so before the Christmas came through. In fact, we sent out an email to our partners saying, just kind of keep an eye out. It looks like sometime around Christmas you may have to be dealing with something. We weren't sure exactly what it was. And a couple of days before Christmas, it started looking more and more like a very strong cold front's going to come through. And with that is going to have those chances for some storms. And a buddy and I were actually on the day shift the day after Christmas, and we put a couple of weather balloons in the air, and once we saw the special sounding at 18Z, we looked at each other and said a couple of words I'm not going to say here, but we kind of knew it was going to be an interesting afternoon. And about 2 hours after the special sounding went up in the air and we thought things were going to rotate, sure enough, things started going, and almost every single storm that day turned into a supercell and started rotating. And of course, the worst of the worst turned into some EF3 and EF4 tornadoes.
Connor McCrory is a student at the University of Oklahoma and returned home to Plano, Texas to celebrate the holidays with his family. Connor is also a storm chaser, and he too was watching the severe weather scenario unfold.
The real big deal was the snowstorm and the winter storm on the backside of that system, and that's what everyone was really paying attention to. I was forecasting for a few days leading up to it, and I posted a status on my Facebook Christmas night, less than 24 hours before the tornado, basically kind of trying to alert my friends in the Dallas area to what I considered to be pretty substantial tornado potential that a lot of people really weren't discussing. And that status kind of blew up and got a lot of attention on Facebook that night, and there were a lot of people casting their opinions about why there might, or a lot more people maybe saying why there would not be tornadoes the next day. So I kind of felt like I was under a little bit of pressure for my forecast to come through, because I basically told a bunch of North Texas that the day after Christmas they were going to be looking at significant tornado potential, and then we'd made the decision to chase the night before, and so we spent all that day on the 26th kind of just sitting around waiting for the right time to head out.
The Storm Prediction Center put out an enhanced risk of severe weather on December 26, 2015, including the potential for tornadoes. By 1:43 p.m., the National Weather Service issued the first tornado warning. A cell had strengthened near Franklin with a possible tornado. It was only the beginning.
In the wintertime, the days are short, and with nightfall at the earliest point of the year, Mark Fox and his staff at the National Weather Service knew that the tornado threat would continue after dark. And it was just then that a major populated area would be in harm's way.
It was right at night. In fact, the first tornado that affected the Metroplex hit right at 6 o'clock, and then the tornado that began in Sunnyvale and then moved up through Garland and Rowlett, then up into Collin County, that started around 6:45 the day after Christmas. So that was a couple of interesting challenges there. Number one, a 6:45 tornado in May is still visible for a lot of folks, but with standard time and with the sun going down relatively early, that when the tornadoes came through, you really couldn't see anything that was out of the ordinary. In fact, other than the lightning, it just looked like a normal everyday storm. And that was really one of the problems that we had with that day is it occurred at night, and not anybody could really see anything coming from miles away. And unfortunately, by the time that the tornadoes came through and hit right there around 6:45, 7 o'clock, that was a lot of people's first indication that things were going to be really bad that day.
Connor McCrory had taken his sister Kathleen on her first storm chase that afternoon, and before sundown, they had already witnessed a tornado.
We were out about an hour east of Dallas, just south of I-30, and so after that tornado, there were new storms heading straight towards downtown Dallas, and that one of them was tornado warned, and so I asked if she wanted to keep chasing. Normally, I mean, under any circumstance I would, but I wasn't sure if she was going to want to with it being her first chase. We turned west on I-30 and started heading straight towards Dallas. As we got close to Dallas, the storm that was heading straight towards downtown weakened, and the tornadoes that had been producing, I believe it stopped producing them, and then it handed off over to the storm just to its east, which ended up being the storm that produced the Garland and Rowlett tornado.
Ed Balderas is the Assistant Emergency Management Coordinator in Rowlett, Texas. He was on duty in the community's Emergency Operations Center as at 2 in the afternoon, once he had heard about the tornadic storms east of town.
I made the decision to go ahead and deploy to the EOC, although we were only under a tornado watch at that point, and I made a decision to go ahead and activate the Emergency Operations Center with my RACES and my CERT volunteer groups. I had 2 representatives in the EOC with me.
While tornado warnings were being issued all across north central Texas, the same tornado Connor McCrory and his sister were tracking was being observed by many other residents. Calls began pouring in to 911.
The tornado is on the ground. It is big, a very large tornado. And it is fixing to go. It's fixing to cross I-30. It's fixing to cross I-30. We need to shut traffic down on I-30.
A large tornado had begun its 13-mile journey just southeast of New Hope, Texas.
The tornado just came through our house, and our whole entire living room and dining room, the whole roof is like gone. And we smell something that's burning, but we have like 5 children in this house.
So a tornado just came through your home, man?
Yes.
It tore through the Sunnyvale community and headed for Interstate 30, where it would do its worst damage. Connor McCrory and his sister Kathleen watched the tornado as they sped close enough to see it, then raced away to miss being caught in its path.
I got out my phone to look at radar. I saw that we had the exit for the President George Bush Turnpike coming up. And I'm very familiar with the roads in this area. So I told my little sister Kathleen to take the George Bush exit. Looking at radar as we came up on the exit, I sort of second guessed for a minute just because I was getting nervous about the fact that we hadn't seen the tornado for nearly a minute, and that we didn't know exactly where it was, and I was worried that it might pass just west of the bridge on the George Bush, and that it might end up barreling straight towards us as we were helpless on the George Bush bridge over Lake Ray Hubbard. Then came time to make a decision. We were at the exit, and so I said, okay, go for it. Take George Bush. We did, and as soon as we took the exit, I mean, no more than 3 seconds after we got to the point of no return on this overpass where it wasn't wide enough for us to turn around. A big, long overpass, and there were cars in front of us. So, and you never know how cars are gonna react, how other non-chasers are gonna react in a situation where they suddenly see a tornado bearing down on them. Boom! There it was. The tornado finally. There were more power flashes, and these power flashes were occurring right there on I-30, just a few hundred yards, quarter mile, half mile at most away from us. And it was moving straight towards us. And I mean, the tornado had gotten just massive. In retrospect, this was right when the tornado was at its EF4 intensity, right before it hit that interchange and moved over the lake. It was right where the tornado was at its strongest, and it just happened to jump out of the dark right at us, right there. So I mean, I immediately, panic is a strong word, but the urgency became very, very real in that moment, and I knew more or less that if the cars in front of us, I remember there were 2 vehicles in front of us, and I knew that if they kept going, that we would probably, had a 95% chance or so of, I didn't know if the cars in front of us were going to stop, so I immediately started urging her to flash her lights at the cars in front of us. She actually began honking at them without me even having to say so, as soon as I started telling her to just drive fast.
Drive fast, drive fast, drive fast, drive fast. Go. Flash your brights, flash your brights.
She started honking, which was good, because I think that may have, who knows, the cars in front of us may have stopped if she hadn't. But I'll tell you, the real hairy part there was when, just when we first got off on that overpass, and then all of a sudden, boom, there it was. You could see it.
Wow. Massive tornado right behind us. Yeah, haul, big tons of debris in the air.
Just was a huge wall of debris surrounding the tornado, and that we were driving straight towards, because that's a long overpass, and you spend the first 15, 20 seconds or so that you're on it. I mean, it's like over a quarter mile to a half mile driving west before it curves north. So we were driving straight towards the tornado for the first half of the time that we were on that overpass. So, I mean, that was an unsettling feeling, because we just had to wait until the road curved north, as we knew it was going to. It happened very quickly, and then there was no time to do anything but react.
The twister continued on its path to the northeast. At its strongest point, it was 550 yards wide, with 170 to 180 mile per hour winds. After it tore through portions of Garland and Rowlett, Texas, Ed Balderas was working feverishly to provide help to those affected.
For me, I was answering calls from those residents that were trapped in homes who were searching for their loved ones. I did have people that I knew were calling in, people who are part of our CERT program were calling in, people who have been part of our CERT program for a long time. So I was fielding calls from people I knew who were trapped, searching for their loved ones. As far as I-30, I was very much removed from that incident response. What you garnered from Garland and elsewhere from the media is probably more than what I've actually seen.
Douglas Mathis is the mayor of Garland, Texas. He recalls watching coverage of the storm making its way through his community.
And I live in more or less the northwest portion of the city. I was almost as far away from the tornado as any other residents of Garland. We're very fortunate that the portion that was hit was actually an isthmus, and the tornado went across that, and if it had cut across any other section of the city, we would have been much more severely impacted than we were.
Mark Fox at the National Weather Service said the Garland area was hit hard when the tornado was at its worst.
The one that went through Garland was definitely the strongest one of the bunch, although the one down in Ovilla, Midlothian, and Glen Heights wasn't too terribly far behind, but the combination of high population area, unfortunately a lot of targets, and just the width of this storm, which was up to 3/4, maybe to a mile wide in some spots, it was kind of the ugly meets all the opportunity. So it just was one of the strongest storms that we had in December, no less. And, the other thing that is about a December tornado is, tornadoes are rare to begin with, but a late December tornado, especially right around Christmas, it was really the last thing on people's minds coming through.
Connor McCrory and his sister Kathleen came close to the tornado while on the interstate. Mark Fox says for those who suddenly found themselves on the road in its path, that's where most of the fatalities occurred.
One of the sad parts about this story is most of them probably were on I-30, but it was right at an intersection where Interstate 30 and the Turnpike, the President George Bush Turnpike came together. So there's a possibility that they were on the bridge coming off the Turnpike or down on the bridge, but everything was just kind of thrown around. And especially at first, I remember getting some reports of a massive traffic accident, and that was kind of our first indication that there was some other damage than just the apartments and the houses out there. And then going out and putting two and two together, it was those cars were damaged and caused all the debris from the tornado and not necessarily just a bad traffic accident. So right there at the intersection of I-30 and President George Bush Turnpike, that's where most of the fatalities occurred, right in that area where cars were either going up on a ramp or coming off of a ramp, and a car in an F4 tornado or the tornado that caused F4 damage. The car, unfortunately, is not going to win that battle too often.
Connor McCrory called off his storm chase. Like most tornado chasers, when damage occurs, they are more concerned with helping people who may be injured or homeless.
Basically, it was time to call off the chase and head back into town. I guess we were still in town. Head back into the part of town where the tornado had come through, because it was the day after Christmas in Dallas-Fort Worth, and a violent tornado had just come through, and we were going to be some of the first people there, and there were going to be a lot of people that needed help. And that's a situation I've been in plenty of times, tornado damage scenes, and I always do stop and try to do what I can if I'm one of the first people, if I'm there before emergency crews. I think storm chasers are valuable in that regard. People come under fire a lot for saying that storm chasers are out there to save lives, and I chase because I enjoy storm chasing, but I also feel my obligation to help people out while I'm out there. So we decided to go back into Garland, and we headed into Rowlett, actually, and we came into the tornado damaged neighborhood. It was already chaotic with police, ambulances going everywhere. Already kind of the chaotic tornado scene where no one's really obeying traffic laws anymore after the fact and all that. We headed back into the neighborhood. We came up on a bunch of homes that had been hit and severely damaged, and so we found one man who had just emerged from his home, which the roof was gone and some of the walls had been blown in on his house. And he was in relatively good spirits considering what had just happened, but he was the first person we came up on, so we asked him if he needed anything. And he was in good spirits, but he was a little frantic, just kind of running around a little, just trying to take care of some stuff. He told us that he was trying to get his 3 dogs together, and I think he only had one of them at that time. And so my sister and I helped him find his dogs, and then we held on to his dogs and helped keep him at my truck until his daughter could come and pick him up and take him to her house to stay. We didn't see anyone that was in any more immediate need of help in our immediate vicinity. We did checks with the neighbors. Everyone said everyone was accounted for in that area.
Mayor Douglas Athis in Garland said because he was so involved during the storm's aftermath, he heard dozens of stories about what happened that night.
I saw a house that had been totally demolished by the storm, except for one short interior wall, and there was a Ford F-150 pickup on top of the house, and then there was a tree on top of that, and 2 young men were walking out, and I asked them if they had been there, and they said no, it was their parents' house. But one of them told me he had left, had gone on an errand, was on his way back, and literally got back to the house minutes after the tornado had gone through. And of course what he saw when he arrived was what I saw, and he knew that his parents and his son was in the house. So he called to them, and they called back. They said they were all right. They weren't hurt, but the room had collapsed on top of them, and they were trapped, but they were not unsafe. The mother had received some scratches. They wanted to know if they felt like they were in enough danger they should start digging them out immediately. And remember, they're in a room with a pickup on top of them. As they described the conditions, the parents chose to wait for emergency responders to get there. And in 45 minutes, they had actually been, with emergency personnel, they had been dug out and rescued. The father that had been trapped had no shoes. There's glass and nails and broken timbers and everything else scattered everywhere. One of the neighbors went to his home, which had been also hit by the tornado, found a pair of shoes to share with this gentleman so he wouldn't be walking around barefoot. Everyone, of course, from every story that I talked to, they checked their immediate house, they checked their family members, and then they immediately went to see if they could aid their neighbors. And that was over and over and over. People's response, wanting to help out their neighbors, was incredible.
Rowlett Assistant Emergency Manager Ed Balderas also heard heroic stories that emerged from those who wanted to help the injured.
I know that our city council member, he was not a city council member before the tornado, but he was afterwards. His name is Bruce Hargrave. Him and Sammy Walker helped rescue a gentleman whose house had collapsed on him. They helped transport him to our local hospital. Unfortunately, he did pass away. He did pass away 2 weeks after. He was the only fatality in Rowlett that I'm aware of that was caused directly by the tornado, injury sustained by the tornado. And I know that story has been pushed out quite a bit. They drove through God knows what type of debris to get him through the hospital. I know that their tires were shredded. Their vehicle was pretty banged up, but they got him to the hospital and gave that family a couple weeks extra with that gentleman who passed away.
Warning Coordination Meteorologist Mark Fox at the National Weather Service says the storms claimed 13 lives and hurt between 67 to 70 others. He was part of the survey team that rated the dozen confirmed tornadoes that occurred on December 26, 2015.
The strongest was just south of Interstate 30, and where Interstate 30 and the President George Bush Turnpike meet in northeastern Dallas. And this was in the vicinity of a apartment complex and also some well-built homes that were pretty much destroyed. There wasn't much left as far as anything of decent structure going through. So you knew that it wasn't just a case of a little bit of the roof coming off or the garage doors being bashed in that led to a couple of windows coming out. It was pretty extensive. In fact, with the team, you'd go through and take a look at some of the street view maps from before the storm and comparing to afterwards, there wasn't much left. In fact, had quite a few of the buildings that were damaged all the way down to their foundation, but still quite a bit of debris in and around the neighborhood. And you also had several spots where some trees were completely disbarked, some trees that were uprooted and then disbarked and thrown everywhere, and cars being flown around. So unfortunately, there was a little bit of everything going on with this storm, and a lot of debris mixed in with a wind speed that was likely up in the high 180 to 200 mile per hour, some close to that. Definitely did a lot of damage.
Assistant Emergency Management Coordinator Ed Balderas says he can't remember anything that was this riveting for the community.
As far as scope, I haven't dealt with anything near this size. Again, I've only been in emergency management for 3 years, so while I haven't been in emergency management for too long, I have had several incidents, including the 2014 Ebola outbreak. I've had a few winter storms, straight line windstorms, but nothing to this magnitude, nothing that generates that amount of destruction. Just the scope of job duties related to this event were well beyond anything I've done before. It was extremely overwhelming. I'm a person who can typically go 3 days without sleep, but I was done both emotionally and physically, mentally by 2 days, and nothing prepares you for this unless you've gone through it. And of course, events of this scope, just localized, don't really happen too often. They happen, for somebody who does. I was reading this this episode 26, the Vicksburg tornado, the piece you did on that. I love that first sentence. They had always said Vicksburg would never have a tornado because of the river. We had sort of the same mentality because of the lake. We call it the Hubbard bubble, that we would never have an event of this scope. So while those events sort of prepared me for the sort of response that I would be required to perform, it was nowhere near what I expected.
Cleanup and recovery was swift, and within a year, workers and volunteers assisted many in getting their lives back to normal. Garland Mayor Douglas Athis said his city had some advantages.
We're very fortunate that we own our own power company. The power company was staging materials immediately at a nearby school that was not affected by it, but the school district gave them access to the school grounds. So immediately they started staging poles, they started staging conductor, they started staging all the other parts that they would need when they started restoring power. They started bringing in contractors to be able to help with the processes. All the different departments in the city have had emergency situations in the last few years that they've had to respond to. We've had ice storms and floods, and so they were a little bit familiar with what they had to do to be prepared and to get in place. We wanted to go through and mark off block by block where we could start recovery efforts. Obviously, there were some areas that were much more heavily damaged than others. We set up a cordon around the area, so that people couldn't come in. We had highway patrol, police from other cities. We had a large number of people from the area respond. One of the things that we had the advantage of is that cities in our part of the state coordinate very often and regularly on emergency management and these types of situations. So when one city is in trouble, other cities are able to respond very quickly and bring help. So we had professional people and a much greater percentage probably than other parts of the country would have had.
In Rowlett, Texas, Ed Balderas says that efforts to restore and rebuild continue today.
The city established a long-term recovery committee to assist those who were impacted. Because again, most of those volunteer organizations leave within the first month or two, depending on the size of the event. They're here only for the short-term recovery. However, we're here with the residents for long-term. So we established that long-term recovery committee, which brought together a lot of the churches and volunteer organizations that were helping those impacted, and helped sort of coordinate a singular approach to that process. And the number, I think we're very well recovered. I think right now we have about 113 lots that are either foundation only or completely empty lots. And this is out of 1,296 properties that were impacted. So our recovery is fairly fast compared to other cities that I've seen go through the same similar type of event.
There have been many organizations who made contributions to enrich the lives of storm victims. Just one of them is Storm Assist, online at stormassist.org. They're a group of storm chasers who contribute their video to help raise money for victims. Skip Talbot is the vice president of Storm Assist.
So yeah, we made a major contribution down in Texas. We raised almost $13,000 for Garland, Texas, and so that was a major contribution, one of our biggest ones.
Garland Mayor Douglas Athis remembers the numerous groups, including Storm Assist, who stepped forward.
The outpouring of help from across our region, from across our state, and literally from across the country was amazing. A number of charities came to help, but the volunteers were everywhere. As I traveled through the stricken area over the next couple of days, people approached me, offering me cash cards because they thought I might have been a victim. They were just people were handing out resources, bringing food, and trying to be helpful without any concern of any sort of payback, because they were giving and not even knowing the individuals that they were giving to, trying to give to. So it was really tremendous how much people really tried to help out.
Meteorologist Mark Fox at the National Weather Service offers his gratitude for the exemplary job the media did in getting the word out about the threat of severe weather. He can't erase from his mind that the timing of when it happened was what contributed to the loss of life.
We went around for, I think it was at least 3 full days of the damage surveys. And one of the things that we like to do is, talk to the people that were there, and try to figure out, did they know it was coming, and when did they know it, and did they understand the forecast and things like that. Sometimes it's a little bit awkward, so you do have to build up a little bit of a rapport and going out there and talking to these folks. But every person over those 3 days that we talked to and we asked them did they know it was coming, only one person out of about 50 or 60 people that we talked to, one person said they had an idea that there was tornadoes coming that day. And if that happens, if tornadoes happen in April, you expect them. If tornadoes happen in December, sometimes you don't really expect them. But the big takeaway that I got out of this is no matter what the calendar says, if the environment's right for tornadoes, this is something you've got to take a look at, and you've got to kind of monitor the weather your own, and you kind of have to own that responsibility to go out and find out what's in the forecast and try to figure out what to do no matter what. Just because the calendar says one thing, it doesn't mean that there's certain types of weather that are not going to happen. So out of about 50 or 60 people that we talked to, only one person said they realized the forecast was for tornadoes and severe thunderstorms, even though those were in the forecast a good 4 or 5 days out before that event.
Next on Tornado Talk, we look back at 2016, the year in severe weather. What were the most powerful, talked about tornadoes of the year? We will count them down. The top 10 tornadoes of 2016 on episode 28 of Tornado Talk.